Your child just handed you a look that says, "I love you, but emotionally, I have moved out." You said, "But I used my softest voice and my best calm face." They replied, "Cool, I still carry the weight of that one Tuesday from 2019. You upgraded everything, your tone, your responses, your parenting podcast playlist. Yet somehow your kid now treats you like a plot twist they never asked for. Because some of the trendiest parenting habits don't actually comfort a child's nervous system. They quietly rewire it, and you won't notice until the emotional wall is already built. Here are 7 signs it's happening right now without you even realizing. Sign 1. You're so encouraging they're paralyzed by the pressure to perform. You've become the parent who says effort matters more than outcomes, which sounds beautiful. But your kid hears that and feels like they're climbing a mountain with no visible summit. You say, "Just try your best," and their brain immediately asks, what does best actually mean? Kids don't thrive inside inspiration. They thrive inside clear, specific, achievable expectations. Ambiguity dressed in encouragement is still ambiguity, and ambiguity is childhood anxiety's favorite food. You say, "I'm proud no matter what," but your shoulders drop just slightly when they struggle. Your face holds a micro expression for about half a second, and they catch every frame. Kids read parental expressions faster than they read textbooks, and they study both very closely. Research shows kids of vague but supportive parents often carry more anxiety than those with strict rules. Strict parents gave clear targets. You gave warm fog, and fog is terrifying when you're 10. So they push harder and overthink longer, chasing the version of your face that looks truly satisfied. And since enough was never defined, they never feel like they've finally crossed the finish line. That invisible pressure quietly plants the seed that failure means losing your love, not just a grade. Which slides directly into the next sign, when your child starts managing your feelings, not their own. Sign 2. You share too much because you believe honesty is always the right choice. Transparency is healthy. Handing your emotional baggage to a child is something completely different. You wanted open communication. You accidentally gave your 10-year-old a part-time therapist job. They now know about your work drama, your money stress, and your unresolved tension with their uncle. Researchers call this parentification. Kids absorbing adult emotional labor before their brains are ready. The second your child starts soothing you, the parent-child dynamic has quietly and completely reversed. They don't comfort you because they're mature. They do it because they're scared of what happens otherwise. Their nervous system logs it as, "If I don't manage this, something important falls apart around me." You wanted a real emotional connection. What formed instead is quiet codependency with a child. And here's the part that breaks quietly. Kids who carry your feelings eventually silence their own. They stop expressing what they feel because they assume you already have more than enough to handle, which takes us straight into the third sign. Being so emotionally regulated, you become emotionally invisible. Sign 3. You're so calm during their meltdowns, you stop feeling like a real person to them. You mastered the regulated parent voice. You speak in smooth sentences. You never visibly crack. Your kid is mid-meltdown, and you respond like a meditation guide who moonlights as a customer service rep. You say, "I hear you're having a big feeling right now." They're thinking, "Is anyone actually home?" Harvard research points out that kids don't need neutrality from a parent. They need a matched response. Not your breakdown, just proof that their emotion landed somewhere real inside another human being. When you go full therapeutic monotone, your child doesn't feel supported. They feel strangely alone. Kids cannot distinguish between "I'm staying calm to support you" and "your feelings don't move me." One of those builds deep trust. The other feels like being gently ghosted by your own parent. Real empathy isn't always composed. Sometimes it's, "That genuinely sounds awful. I'd be frustrated too." The moment your child stops bringing you their chaos is the moment you lost the connection quietly. And that distance leads directly into the next habit, one that looks like love but quietly erodes authority. Sign 4. You treat boundaries like they might break the relationship if enforced too firmly. Somewhere your goal of being a safe parent turned into approving every single request that came in. Your kid asks for one more snack, one more episode, one more exception, and you calculate the emotional risk. If I say no, will they feel rejected? If I say yes again, what exactly am I teaching them? Here's what children actually experience. Inconsistency doesn't feel like kindness. It feels like instability. Kids don't love every rule you set, but they love knowing that the rules exist and will stay. Boundaries communicate something powerful. Someone is steering the ship and they won't abandon the wheel. No boundaries communicate something else. We're both figuring this out and no one is actually in charge. Kids don't resent limits. They resent the anxiety that comes from a world with no reliable structure. And when you're afraid to hold a firm line, you begin rescuing them from every discomfort instead. Which leads perfectly into the 5th sign, the habit that feels heroic but quietly builds fragility. Sign 5. You remove every obstacle before your child even knows the obstacle existed. Your kid mentions stress, and you're already solving the problem before they finish the sentence. They forget something at school, and you treat the situation like an emergency requiring immediate intervention. You're not parenting anymore. You're running a full-service operation with a clientele of one small human. Stanford calls this snowplow parenting, clearing the path so completely that friction never touches them. But friction is exactly where children build the emotional muscles they will need their entire lives. Every small failure they experience and survive becomes evidence that they are more capable than they thought. The child who left lunch at home and got hungry once remembers that lesson for the rest of their life. When you rescue reflexively, their brain logs. I cannot solve problems alone. Someone else handles that. Confidence isn't built through comfort. It's built through small struggles that end in personal victory. Next time instinct says, fix it, try asking, what do you think you could try here? Instead. And when you rescue too often, a quiet shift happens. They start seeing you as staff, not as a parent. Which is exactly what sets up the 6th sign, the one where you trade authority for approval. Sign 6. You wanted to be the cool parent, and now they're running the entire household. You committed to being different from your own parents, more open, more relatable, more emotionally present. Your kid calls you by a nickname. They've explained why your rules are historically and culturally outdated. You wanted to be the parent who gets it. You became the roommate who apologizes for asking about homework. Friendship runs on equality. Parenting requires someone to be in charge, and that someone must be you. Harvard research shows teens with overly permissive parents are significantly more likely to hide serious behavior. Not because they're dishonest by nature, but because they genuinely don't know where the real line is. They'll share everything, except the things that actually require a parent's guidance and intervention. The moment they sense you care more about being liked than being trustworthy, your real authority evaporates. They begin using guilt and emotional language because they've learned it works better than any argument. A friend tells you what you want to hear. A parent tells you what you actually need to hear. Your kid won't remember every night you said yes. They'll remember when you held firm and stayed anyway. Because it's not friends who get teenagers safely through adolescence. It's parents who stay in the role. And all of this builds toward the final sign, the one no one wants to admit is actually a problem. Sign 7. You believe love is enough, but love without structure quietly teaches the wrong lessons. You hug often, you validate every feeling, you listen with your whole self, and that genuinely matters. But love without consistent structure doesn't create safety for a child. It creates soft, comfortable chaos. Kids start using love as a negotiation tool. Dad loves me, so this consequence probably won't actually stick. They learn that emotion is a currency and that enough of it can dissolve any rule that feels inconvenient. Columbia developmental research found kids raised in emotion first, but structure light homes struggle as adults. Not because they weren't loved deeply, but because they never learned that consequences and care coexist. They grow up believing that being corrected means being rejected instead of being guided by someone invested. The truth most parenting content avoids saying out loud: love is not a substitute for clear expectations. Love is actually the reason you enforce the boundary, because you care about who they're becoming. When love erases structure entirely, children learn that comfort equals safety, and they chase that forever. But here is the part almost every well-meaning parent misses when they're deep inside these patterns. This isn't about being a perfect parent. No version of that exists, and chasing it causes its own damage. It's about being self-aware enough to recognize a pattern before it becomes the legacy you pass down unintentionally. Your child doesn't need someone who never gets it wrong. They need someone who notices and adjusts. One day they'll say, "My parent made mistakes, but they were honest about it, and that changed everything." That honesty, not perfection, is what heals a family across generations and actually builds real trust. If you recognize yourself in any of these 7 signs, that's not a judgment about who you are. That's the starting point. And starting points are exactly where all meaningful change actually begins.